History of the development of Islam in China. Islam has a long history in China. Islamic encounters in China began during the Rashidun Caliphate, coinciding with the rule of the Tang Dynasty from 618–907 AD. It is said that Islam spread in China through maritime trade routes. At that time, the Chinese government was already trading with Persians, Arabs, and Indians. Specifically, Caliph Uthman Bin Affan sent his envoy, Saad bin Abi Waqas, to meet Emperor Yong Hui in 651 AD. The meeting between Saad bin Abi Waqqas' friend and Emperor Yong Hui was the beginning of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Islamic countries. The milestone of Islamic Chinese diplomatic success was the establishment of the Huaisheng Mosque, or Saad bin Abi Waqqas Mosque in Guangzhou. The mosque is claimed to be the oldest mosque in mainland China, more than 1,300 years old. On the other hand, the increasingly developed sea and land trade routes made many Islamic traders settle permanently in China. During the Mongol rule in China, Islamic traders helped with expansion. Their presence spread to remote areas of China. These Muslims also married and had children with local residents. Their generation was called Huihuis. Then during the Yuan dynasty, 1271 to 1368, they were given positions, high social status, and social security. Therefore, many Muslims from the Arabian Peninsula and surrounding areas came to China. In 1368 AD, the Yuan dynasty collapsed and was replaced by the Ming dynasty, 1368–1644 AD. The situation turned around. Islamic activities are increasingly restricted. One of the famous Islamic figures at that time was Yong Hui, or better known as Cheng Ho. He received an order from Emperor Ming 1402–1424 to sail for 28 years. This was later considered a milestone in the spread of Huihui's Islam from China. Cheng Ho, who sailed through the Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and the east coast of Africa, left many Chinese Islamic legacies in more than 30 countries, including Indonesia. The Ming dynasty reformed the government system and bureaucracy by reducing the political status of the Huihuis, limiting trade with outside China, and prohibiting same-race marriages, which resulted in the splitting of the Huihuis ethnic group. This ethnicity is divided into 10 parts with 2 different religious systems, namely Sunni and Menhuans, Sufi. The Sunni sect of Islam adhered to by people in the Xinjiang region includes Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Khalkha, Uzbeks, Tartars, except Tajiks who adhere to Shia. Then Menhuans was adopted by Muslims in the interior of China, including Hui, Salas, Dongxiang, and Bao'an. Islamic Dawah strategy in China. Islam entered China through diplomatic and trade routes starting in the 7th century AD. At that time, most of China's population was Buddhist, but Chinese people could accept Islam openly. This shows that Islam is able to adapt and does not clash with local trends. Not only that, the adaptation carried out by Islam with local Chinese society formed a new culture. For example, from an architectural perspective, the roof of a Chinese mosque is in the form of a temple, adapting to local architecture, saying prayers with Chinese pronunciation. Translating the Holy Quran into Chinese, grave pilgrimage and tahleel adapted from Confucius Xiao's form of devotion, as well as make Chinese calligraphy writing, which is usually called khat. The current situation of Muslims in China. In 2022, the estimated Muslim population in China will be around 28,127,500, around 1.73% of China's total population. The famous Islamic organization in China is the Chinese Muslim Association, which was formed in 1952. According to the chairman of the Islamic Association, Guo Chengzhen, In 2010, around 40,000 mosques had been built in China. The number of mosques continues to increase from year to year. In addition, the Chinese government exempts Muslims from carrying out religious activities because their existence is protected by valid national laws. During Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr too, mosques in China are always crowded with Muslim people. When it comes to food, Chinese Muslims have no difficulty getting halal food because many halal restaurants have been built throughout China. Islam is a universal religion, which can be accepted by all groups, tribes, nations, and customs. Therefore, Islam was quickly accepted by society because of its principles of tolerance, tasamu, moderation, tawasuth, justice and balance, tawazun. This also happens to Chinese society. This country, with a population now of more than 1 billion, accepted Islam with a warm welcome. At that time, China was ruled by Emperor Yong Hui. Some also say the name Yong Hui. This data on the entry of Islam into China was confirmed again by Ibrahim Tianying Ma in his book, Muslims in China, Development of Islam in China. This book fully examines the history of the development of Islam in China from its inception until the 1980s. Previously, many stories had developed regarding the arrival of Islam in this bamboo curtain country. However, all of these sagas tell of the main figure behind the spread of Islam in China. The first version mentions that the teachings of Islam first arrived in China, brought by the companions of the Prophet Saw, who migrated to Al-Habasha, Abyssinia, Ethiopia. The Prophet's companions migrated to Ethiopia to avoid the anger and fury of the ignorant Quraysh masses. They include Ruqayya, the Prophet's daughter, Uthman bin Affan, Ruqayya's husband, Saad bin Abi Waqas, and a number of other companions. The companions who migrated to Ethiopia received protection from King Atsmaha-Negus in the city of Aksum. Many friends chose to stay and not return to Arab land. It is said that these are the ones who later sailed and arrived in mainland China at the time of the Sui dynasty, 581–618 AD. Other sources say that Islamic teachings first arrived in China when Saad bin Abi Waqas and his 3 companions sailed to China from Ethiopia in 616 AD. After arriving in China, Saad returned to Arabia and 21 years later returned to Guangzhou with the holy book of the Quran. There are also those who say that Islamic teachings first arrived in China in 615 AD, approximately 20 years after the Prophet Muhammad died. It was Caliph Uthman bin Affan who assigned Saad bin Abi Waqas to bring Islamic teachings to mainland China. It is said that Saad died in China in 635 AD. His grave is known as Guy's Mazars. According to Ibrahim Tianying Ma in his book, Muslims in China, this last version is more valid. The envoy of Caliph Uthman was openly received by Emperor Yong Hui of the Tang Dynasty. Emperor Yong Hui appreciated Islamic teachings and considered Islamic teachings to be similar to the teachings of Confucianism. To show his admiration for Islam, the emperor permitted the construction of the first mosque in Chang'an, Canton. The mosque is called Huaisheng, or Memorial Mosque. According to Ibrahim Tianying Ma's version, the mosque was named Quang Ta Se, which means Shining Tower, and was built by Yusuf. Meanwhile, another mosque built here is Chi Lin Se, which means the mosque with one horn. Both mosques still stand today after 14 centuries. When the Tang Dynasty came to power, China was reaching its golden age and becoming culturally cosmopolitan. So Islamic teachings easily spread and became known to the Chinese people. After the time of the Prophet, Islam spread throughout the world, one of which was China. The Sino-Hui Muslim community has many traditions resulting from the fusion of Chinese and Islamic culture. Muslims began arriving in China in significant numbers during the Mongol period under the Yuan dynasty, 1271 to 1368. Previously, Arab and Persian travelers and traders came from West Asia in small numbers and lived in relatively remote communities. The Mongol period brought a diaspora of several million Central Asian Muslims to work as scientists, geographers, astronomers, musicians, craftsmen, soldiers, and administrators. Most of them started marrying Han women, and their children were raised as Muslims. However, within a few generations, assimilation into Chinese society began to increase. This acculturation took on a new form and pace during the Ming Dynasty, 1368–1644, which instituted a Sino-centric homogenization policy that required Muslims to marry Han women and speak Chinese. Religious and cultural exchange during Mongol rule was also reduced by travel policies that restricted Muslims from traditional learning networks, language, and homeland. In the waning years of the Ming Dynasty, many Muslims had lost control of linguistic skills in Arabic and Persian, except for their most basic usage. Islamic education does not have a formal teaching system and relies on limited textual sources. This characterizes the early life of Hu Dengzhou around 1522–1597, who later established an important institutional system for teaching Islam in China, namely Holy Book Hall education, Jingtang Jiaoyu. Dissatisfied with the level of instruction he could obtain at the local mosque in the northwestern province of Shanxi, he decided to seek a more traditional Islamic education at centers of learning in Central Asia and Mecca. After several years of study, Hu returned with many Islamic books for his studies. Hu finally had the components to build a program that was systematic and easily accessible. Along with a formal curriculum of Arabic and Persian texts, Hu also provided students with financial support that enabled them to travel from all corners of the empire. Hu's scripture hall education system was the most effective for other Muslim communities throughout China. In addition, the education system received direct encouragement to produce Islamic texts in Mandarin. Many introductory students are fluent in speaking only Chinese and have little knowledge of foreign languages. These lower-level students study the Quran and basic Islamic textbooks covering prayer, ablution, matters of faith, worship, fasting, weddings, and funerals. This curriculum and teaching methods were easily duplicated elsewhere in China, and graduating students were able to establish their own schools. Linguistic flexibility and teaching through Chinese is highly valued in cities with smaller Muslim populations that are fully assimilated into the Chinese cultural and social environment. In places far from the majority community in northwest China, such as the coastal city of Nanjing, the former capital of the Ming Dynasty, Muslim students are well versed in the Confucian classics, but cannot read foreign language writings. Nanjing is a large metropolitan center with a strong literacy culture. This means Muslims are well versed in Chinese philosophical and historical traditions. Here, the framework of the Holy Book Hall developed due to the combination of Islamic and Chinese languages and educational strategies. Soon the city welcomed several important teachers and many regular students and became a center for the production of Hanbuku texts. Some of these authors even self-identify as educated Muslim scholars of Confucianism, Huiru.